Well, you do know that we are 100 and more years after the famine. And during the famine, workhouses were built in Ireland to house poor families and the people who had nowhere to go and nothing to eat, literally. And in Cavan, there is one such workhouse still standing as it was those many hundreds of years ago, and that's St. Phelim's. It was called a workhouse then, but it's now St. Phelim's. It was a hospital for a time. And there is such history to that. Well, today, we here in Cavan TV saw some of that history come to life. In old years, St. Phelim's was a workhouse, and in later years, it was a maternity hospital, and then years after that again, it was a nursing home for the elderly. Well, we have the story, and we followed it today on camera in Cavan TV. I have the story of Mary Taylor, and Mary came to tell us the story of Annie Blessing, who is her grandma, and the story, and she brings it alive, the history alive. So I'd like to welcome in the studio now, thank you, Mary Taylor. Mary Taylor from London. Mary, I get the name right. Mary, it was a beautiful day today, wasn't it?
Yes, it was lovely. Yeah.
Very special
Very
occasion
nice.
for you. You have the story, the lovely story, very sad at times, but the lovely story of Annie Blessing. And there we have, we'll be able to put it up on the screen for you later on. There's a little snapshot of Annie Blessing. Today you laid a wreath at Annie's grave. Now go very back and tell me, real back to the start, and tell me the story of Annie Blessing.
I only know what my mum's told me. My mum was 4 when her mother died. She didn't really remember her mum, but she remembered that she died through childbirth, and when she went to see her mum in the coffin, she can't remember her mum's face, but she can remember the baby at the foot of her coffin. She was never taken back to see the grave or the grave site. She didn't know where it was.
We know that now as Bully's Acre, and Bully's Acre is a term for a graveyard where people who had no families maybe to come and take them, and they were buried there in a common graveyard kind of thing. And that is actually in St. Phelim's Hospital.
Yeah.
And you went to lay a wreath there today in memory of your grandma.
Yeah.
Now, Mary, tell me why. You don't really know why, but why do you think your grandma was actually buried there when she wasn't brought home to her own family and parish?
We're not sure. We've put it down to that there was no money around. Her husband was in the army. He was called back, and then from what we can make out is that he just went back to the army. There was other siblings, there was 4 other siblings, and she did have family, but we don't even know if they were sort of local to her or whether they'd moved out further into Ireland or where any of them were.
Have you any idea in Cavan where they lived?
No. Well, Annie and the family, they were in Belturbet. That's where they lived.
So then, your mum, what's her name?
Rosaline.
Rosaline found at the age of 4 that she was motherless, and her dad was in the army. So then the family were then fostered, and she was put in at the age of 4 into St. Clair's orphanage in Cavan town. This is in the years after the fire, of course.
Yeah, it was about 1.5 years or maybe 2 years, I'm not sure. There's about a year's difference in my mum's timing. But yeah, she was put into the convent with her sister.
And the boys went?
And the boys were sent out to brotherhoods or foster care. You know, there was a lot of aunties and uncles that were there to look after them at the time, but then they couldn't keep them. The dad went back to get them and put them into the convent.
Yeah. So that's very sad, but that's what happened to families in those days when there wasn't a parent, was a parent missing, and they deemed that maybe the dad wasn't able to look after the kids or the mother wasn't able to look after the kids. They put them in a place like that.
Yeah.
So how long did your mum stay there for?
I think it was about 5.5 years, maybe 6 years, with her sister. And then her dad came to get her, and she was near enough 10, and then he took them out. He had married again and also had 2 other children. So they were left, really, I always said, so you were left there 2 or 3 years longer than you could have been. You know, he could have took you out sooner. But you don't know the circumstances and why they were left. And
did you feel back in those days that people didn't talk about it then? They didn't pass
oh,
the story
no.
down?
No, it was, they just didn't say anything about the past or things that had happened. It was all taboo, and you just didn't, it wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
So
your mum didn't speak about what life was like to live in the orphanage at that time?
Not really, I mean, she's only started telling me things since, I'd say, in the last 20 years. So for 30 years of my life, we've not spoke about things like that. You know, I didn't even know that her mum's name was Aine until maybe 10 years ago. And, you know, you start talking, I've brought my family up, and then my children got inquisitive about, well, what was your nanny's name, and did you ever see your nanny? And I was like, well, no, I'll have to speak to Nanny about that. You know, so that's how it all started. My children wanted to know things, and I didn't even know. So I had to then start asking my mum, and that's when she started talking all about her childhood and where she came from.
So her dad came back with a new wife and 2 other children. That would have been pretty hurtful to his first family, seeing that he could rear 2 other kids and left his other children. But anyways, so then when your mum was about 10, where did they go to live then?
In Cavan.
Somewhere in Cavan?
Yeah.
And then at what stage did your mum went to work in England?
Yeah, she came over to England. She was 22, 23 when she first went to England, and she's never been back. Because
so
I
that's
suppose
how you were born in London. That's your story.
Yeah,
you grew up in London.
yeah. And I just think she thinks there was nothing for her to come back for, because all her brothers and sisters had come to England as well, and.
Well, that would have been maybe the story of people at the time. You know, Ireland was in recession, depression, whatever, and a lot of people had to emigrate to get work, and that was the way. So you grew up in London, and you decided to follow up the story and find out the story of your nan and find out the story of Annie.
Yeah.
How did you go about that when you eventually did get some information out of your mum?
Social media. I was on Facebook and websites, and I joined the Cavan Orphanage website, and I just put little messages on there, and that's when I got in touch with Martina and Eliza and Trish, and they were really helpful. They just so good on the internet and just helped find like names and come up straight away with Annie Eves, married to John Blessing, and so it was really quick. Once I'd started doing it, it was so quick. Yeah, it was very good.
It's a lovely story. It's a sad story, but it's nice that you're able to come back today. And you did several things today. You went first to St Clair's Convent, where you went into the chapel there, and in memory of your mum, of your grandmother. Sorry, no, your mum.
My mum, she was there.
Your mum was in the orphanage for many years. And I'm sure your mum would have grown up with the horror of the story of the night of the big fire as well. Yeah,
she never really mentioned it a lot, but she did say her father had told her a lot about it, so and then obviously her sister would have known bits about it. But I'm not sure how much they actually knew, but they knew enough for me to say, well, I'd like to go to the convent and see where you were from, but also remember all those girls. Yeah,
and you obviously went, and we will have a nice little documentary. We'll do a nice little edited piece on that. You went out to Cully's graveyard as well, to the mass grave, to where, was it 36?
35 girls. 35. There was one adult. I think she was the cook.
Yeah, that's right. You've got an 80-year-old lady as well.
Yeah.
Social media got you in contact with all of this and got your story there. That's good stuff. Now, when you obviously went back and Googled a lot of the stories about St Clair's and St Phelim's and things like that, was that hard? Were you intrigued by a story? Were you saddened by your story? Were you going, wow, I want to know more?
Yeah. No, really, just very saddened. You know, to think that the girls couldn't get out and they couldn't be saved, and there's a lot of history there, and it is just very sad.
Yeah. so you were sad.
Yeah.
And did that make you want to find out exactly where, when and how and all that?
I didn't want to dig deep into the actual story because it is, you know, you don't want to upset something that happened so many years ago, because like people say, it is done, and it's remembered and they've got a lovely memorial. But because it was all fresh to me, I did want to know everything, and you know, but because my mum was there, and I think, God, thank God she wasn't there then, because otherwise this wouldn't be happening, you know. But it's just all really, it's sad times, but you have to
it's in our
learn
past.
just learn to have it in the back of your memory all the time, and never forget what happened.
Today at the when you left the wreath in Bolly Cemetery, Father Magoon, isn't that his name?
Yep.
He said a lovely thing about the memories of the people, to treasure the memories and let them. It was John O'Donoghue's blessing of passing a graveyard. Let their memories be.
Yeah.
A lot of people buried there, and I think it's wonderful that you brought it to the fore. In Cavan history, kind of know, yes, that's where the poor people died in the famine. That's where people who had nobody to claim them died. But you've put a face and a name to it, Mary, and that's beautiful. It's sad, but it's beautiful, and it's nice to do that.
Yeah.
So if there are other people out there as well, maybe have the same, know that the same is in their family, what would you say to them, Mary? Would you say go out and find it, treasure them, but don't upset anybody, but go out and find the story, and give these people, as you say, look at that, that's absolutely beautiful. You've given the lady a face, a story.
Yeah, just carry on looking, because they're there somewhere, and if it's been within the last 100 years, you'll find them. I mean, this is 72 years on, and although I'm still young, I just wanted to find closure for my mum, so it's worth looking and keep looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at you today when you're performing the different things, and you're kind of like, we're a little bit bewildered by it all in your gentle way, but at the same time I could see that it was bringing you a bit of peace, a bit of closure perhaps, especially when we were up there in Bully's Acre. There was a lovely serenity. The special Phil sang as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Something nice and touching about that, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I asked my mum, you know, if you could have picked a song for the ceremony back then, what would you have picked? And she said, oh, I don't really know anything from back then. So I said, well, pick one now that you like. And In the Arms of an Angel she's always said it's her favourite. So
beautifully sung by Phil today,
yeah,
actually.
beautiful, yeah.
So now, did you find it emotionally draining or emotionally fulfilling? Kind of, in what way?
Very surreal. Yeah, emotional.
That's the way you actually looked today.
Yeah, it's just, I felt sad because my mum couldn't be here. It's just a shame that there wasn't an actual spot, but I know that can't ever have happened. And I'd love to have known why she was put there, but there's a story to every past, and hopefully we can still keep digging a bit deeper and find out why she was put in Bully's Acre and not in a cemetery where we could have went to visit or where my mum could have visited. So we'll keep digging a little bit more.
Okay. Well, there you are, folks. That's a beautiful story, and the beautiful story of Aine Blessing. 72 years on, she's remembered by her daughter, Mary Tyler. Mary, I think you did a beautiful thing today, and thank you very much.